dive into the task at hand, which is we've been accepted to these colleges. We've got offers from these colleges. How do we make them better?
How do we get more moolah?
We get more.
And as we're waiting for everybody, just a couple housekeeping things. We love questions. So unless we tell you to put something in the chat, which we will in a minute, but your questions throughout the webinar, please put those in the Q&A because they'll get captured. It's one place for the two of us to look. And you can also be anonymous. If you want to ask something that you don't want to have your name attached to, you can just click that box. So put that in there, and we will be sending out a recording and the slides tomorrow. So if you have to leave early or you get distracted or whatever, don't worry about that. Or if you want to share it with somebody else in your household, you'll be able to do that as well.
To get us cooking here, I think just about everybody's class 2023 family, right? Student and/or parents. If you want to confirm that, throw it in the chat. What is the class of the student that we're getting ready to help here? And then the next one, and I think even more exciting, what college or colleges are we getting ready to do battle with here a little bit, right? Whether we've got an award and we want to go back or we're waiting on an award. Okay, Wesleyan, Brown, Penn State, Texas A&M, Bama, Whitman, G-Tech, Maryland, Santa Clara, Eckerd, Virginia Tech, go Hokies, Syracuse, Northeastern, Kansas State. We're Bard, Gonzaga. There you go, out in your neck of
Zags, I picked them to go all the way.
I did too. Did you take them? I'm like, this has got to be the year, one of these years. Come on. They got to finish it off one of these years. Drexel, okay. Lehigh.
We got a very good showing of schools. That's awesome.
Represented, yeah. And you know what? Some of these we're going to talk about specifically, but at a minimum, we're going to talk about how we bucket kind of each one of these. So we will get there. Okay, I think without further ado, I'll quickly introduce myself. For those of you that I'm a new face, my name is Matt Carpenter. I'm one of the founders at College Aid Pro. Been doing this for my entire career, which is just about 20 years now. This is my 19th class. So we're coming up on 2 full decades here, but this is my favorite part of the process. I love getting an award and helping figure out how do we go back to these schools and get more money. First of all, it's great to know that that's a thing, right? That even exists. This was a very well kept secret 5 years ago and beyond that. It's more knowable now. But it's absolutely still a thing, but it's become more sophisticated, right? Now colleges are saying, well, we're not just going to give you a few more bucks because he asked. How sophisticated are you in your appeal? And that's going to dictate whether or not, among other things, of course, which will hit on a lot of variables. That's going to dictate how much more, if anything, we give you. I'm just going to get ahead of one thing that you'll hear a couple times over tonight. Generally speaking, I saw some of these schools, Penn State. We love Penn State, Pitt, Iowa, some of these big flagship, the UCs, right? In general, I'm seeing UDEL right here. In general, the state flagship universities are less likely to move the needle. They are less likely to give more money than the original offer, unless we have a few kind of strong pieces of ammunition, and we'll get specific in terms of what those mean. But again, I saw Bama, right? Unless we're playing for Coach Saban, we're bearish that we're going to be able to get more money there. It doesn't mean it doesn't happen. We're seeing, for example, the University of Iowa's being really generous with appeals this year, but that's one kind of theme that you'll hear throughout tonight. And it doesn't mean don't appeal there. It doesn't mean it's not going to be successful, but I just want to set that precedent out of the gate. Again, excited to talk about this, excited to tell you how we can make you smarter in this process, how our technology can make you smarter. And you might be working with the most first person in how to be successful in this. And that's the fairy godmother of financial aid herself, Peg Keough.
I know about
the show here. Yeah, it's probably me, but you're close.
Yeah, and I see a lot of bunch of IECs too. So welcome you guys as well and your families, because I know we have a bunch of people from the IEC community too. So that's awesome. Yeah, so I'm Peg Keough. I have not been doing this exclusively as long as Matt. I've been doing financial stuff longer than Matt because I'm a little older than him. But I've been focusing on this for over a decade, and this is what gets me out of bed. I love this stuff. I love working with families and advisors and IECs and school counselors. And as Matt said when we first got on, this is just a really fun part of the process. You've gotten into schools, and we're just trying to see if we can get a little bit more money, right?
And Peggy, I don't know if you can relate to this, but somebody just wrote in the chat that they have twins they're getting ready to send to school. I don't know if that.
Yes, I can. I had twins. I usually say that in my intro. They are done with college. I'll tell you, whoever put that in, you'll make it through. A lot of deep breaths, but you'll make it through. And hopefully they won't graduate from college on the same weekend like mine did. So that was a little crazy. But anyways, you'll make it through. Oh, and you have an older child too. So you're basically a real badass then, because I only had two. So kudos to you on that one. All right, let's get going here. And just again, with questions around the content, let's pop those in Q&A, and we love questions. So don't be shy. All right. So if you don't know, we introduced ourselves, but we're from College Aid Pro. And this is truly our mission. And the way that, in my mind, that we do this is what Matt and I are doing tonight, is educating parents and all the different players in this space. Because the more that families are informed consumers, the better this whole thing will flow for you, hands down, and you will have more power in the process. And it starts from the beginning, but now that we're getting closer to the end for senior parents, same thing here. The stuff we're going to share with you tonight is going to put you in a better position to approach these schools correctly and to know how and when to approach them and in what situations. So there we are, the happy couple. You should have received an email this morning encouraging you to set up your free MyCap account. So if you did, great. Hopefully you can have that open on another computer near us, because when you pop in there, when we pop in there to show you some stuff about appealing, you can move around on your site too. That's your dashboard. If you haven't, no big deal. Good thing to do, go in and set up your free account. You're going to be able to upload award letters. Matt's going to show you how to do that. We'll help you translate them and actually, give you a little heads up of, hey, should you be appealing or not? So definitely take care of that. You don't do it during the webinar, no problem. Matt's going to put this in the chat. You can click on it. It'll open up in another tab, and you can do it right when we're
just to piggyback, and I did put it in the chat, Peg, but just to piggyback on that super quick, but for tonight's content, obviously, if you haven't set up the account, I'd recommend it, because as you're learning here, you can upload your financial aid award letters. It's going to translate them, but then it's going to tell you the platform, did you get a good deal? And we'll walk through that. I'll actually show you guys a case study, and then we'll talk about whether you did or didn't get a good deal, how and to who do we go back and try to get a few more bucks. But sorry, Peggy, go ahead.
No, you're fine. So we're talking about uploading your award letter. So there's a little bit of confusion around this with parents. So I want to make sure it's clear. When your child gets into school, you get a letter saying, he or she gets a letter saying, hey, congratulations, you got into XYZ school, and maybe there's a scholarship even referenced on there. That's from the Office of Admissions saying you got in. Then what comes later, and it depends on how you apply for admission, when you actually get what's called the financial aid award letter. That's going to be from the Office of Financial Aid, not the Office of Admissions. It will have merit aid on it, which is number 2 on the slide here. Merit scholarships will be on there, but that will be the complete package. So when we get to that part when Matt goes through that, you're going to want to upload that. That's the actual financial aid package that the college is awarding the student, and that's what you're going to appeal. You can't upload the letter from Office of Admissions, because that's not the financial aid award letter. So what should we see on the award letter? You'll see grants, which are typically need-based. That's usually the term for need-based. They could come from the college, from endowment money, the federal government in the form of Pell or an FSEOG grant. It could be state grants as well. Most states have programs in that. So this is gift aid, the free stuff. So that's based on financial need. Then you can also get what's called merit scholarship, so non-need-based aid. So Bill Gates's kids can get this. The college is discounting their cost, and they don't really care about your ability to pay. The third bucket is work study. So you have to have financial need to be awarded federal work study. Basically, your child can apply for a job and get a paycheck and a W-2 and use that to pay for college or whatever you decide to use those funds for. But that's part of a financial aid package, or it can be. And then the last bucket is student and parent loans. You'll see federal direct student loans and what's called a Parent Plus loan, or they might even just call it a plus loan now. So those are the 4 buckets. Hopefully you're going to see a cost of attendance on there too, which is the sticker price, the full cost. And that's the biggest way to know if you're confused about what you have. If you see federal student loans on there, it's definitely a financial aid award letter. So let's take a couple minutes.
Sorry, Peggy, let me break in just a minute here because we've got a couple of the same questions and they're going to keep coming and they're important ones. One is we've got a bunch to say, hey, I've had a change since my FAFSA and CS profile were submitted, or 2021 was an anomaly in the sense that I made way more than I typically do. We're going to address both of those things. And the other one, should I accept or put my deposit into a school or accept the offer before appealing? The answer to that question is no. We always want to go through the appeal process before we accept our offer, before we put our deposit in. Some folks have shared that they've already done that. That's okay. It doesn't mean that it's impossible to have a successful appeal. We still could, and we still do sometimes. But if you have not reached that stage in which you've accepted the offer by submitting your deposit, you want to sit tight until the appeal process. But those are 2 that we got flooded with in different variations. So I wanted to break in there.
Sure. All right. So let's look at a couple of these financial aid award letters. Because we have the translator now, if you upload your awards, it's going to do this for you. But I still think it's a good idea for you guys to understand what you're looking at. And unfortunately, these aren't all the same. The colleges don't have a uniform format that they're following. There's been a big push to try and do that, but it's just never happened. So here's an award from UC Davis. So if you look at the top here, you see the cost of attendance is nicely laid out and broken into the line items, which is good because the big sticker price is not as helpful as seeing the breakdown. So the total cost, and this is a couple years old, so it's more expensive now. You're looking at about $59,500. Then they talk about, they're calling it over on the left contributions, but then they do use the term expected family contribution, so EFC. So that's how much they think this family can afford to pay for a year. So that comes out to a little bit over $36,000. And then they calculate here, okay, the need is about $23,231, right? Then the next piece is, what's your estimated financial aid? So they're giving what's called, and I mentioned this a minute ago, a Parent Plus loan. So that's a federal loan that's given to the parent. And then both a subsidized and unsubsidized federal direct loan. If you don't know what those are, that's okay. Our next part of our webinar series is going to be all about loans and getting in the weeds on loans. We're not doing that tonight. If we get a lot of questions, I can quickly touch on that. But they're both loans, right? And so then at the end of the day, UC Davis says, okay, this is your award, basically $56,374 in loans. So there was none of that free stuff in here. So that's how this one pans out. Now let's look at one from DU, from University of Denver. They nicely break out the total direct costs, which is good because the indirect costs are not what you're paying the college, hence the name. So there is some wiggle room in there around personal expenses, books, and transportation, right? If this is a Colorado kid, they probably aren't going to spend that amount of money. So it's nice to see the breakdown, and then you guys can tweak your cost of attendance. Then they lay out the free money, the gift aid, like I've referenced. So there's a merit scholarship and then a residence hall grant, which is probably need. The word grant is used, and it's very important for you to understand is each piece you get, if you get more than one like this, is it merit or is it need-based aid? And the reason why is that merit aid is almost always offered for all 4 years. So it's awesome for planning in your 4-year cash flow. Need-based aid, you will submit forms every year, and that can fluctuate. Matt said there's questions coming in about people's financial situation changing. Need-based aid will change. So it's important to understand that distinction. Then DU says, yep, you're seeing this again, unsubsidized and the subsidized direct student loans. And then at the bottom, they nicely point out the estimated direct cost without loans and with loans. Without loans is really what matters because loans have to be repaid, obviously. So that's an example there. The last one I'm going to show here, we have this one in here. There's a lot of the same stuff that I've already pointed out, but you'll see here that Occidental actually has their own loan. And this does happen. It's not super common, but it's not rare either. And it's important to look at these loans because the ones I've looked at with families, they're pretty good as far as the loan terms and the interest rate. So definitely check those out. They might be better than other loan options that you might be considering. And then you're going to see down here in the right corner, you're almost always going to see Parent Plus loans on a financial aid award letter because the colleges can give a Parent Plus loan for basically their cost of attendance minus any other aid between the direct student loans or grants or scholarships. That difference they can offer to parents because it is a parent loan. And those numbers are sizable typically. So you really want to think about those loans. And again, that's a subject of another webinar, but there you go. That's on. Okay, so now you've gotten the awards, you understand them, you understand the pieces. Now the next piece is, how do you know if you received a fair award or another way, a good award? So I'm going to turn this over to you, Matt, so you can talk through this. Oh, I can't hear you. You're muted, bud.
Sorry, it's because I was banging away on my keyboard.
I know.
These folks are keeping me busy, which is great. And a lot of great questions. And a couple of repeats we got was around multiple children and the FAFSA changes and triplets. They were saying, but who cares about twins? We got triplets. If you can just put in the chat our petition. I don't want to sidebar too much, but some of you may have heard, or if you haven't heard, there's some sweeping changes coming to college in general, and specifically financial aid starting next year and to the FAFSA, but it's going to have a bigger impact than just the form itself. But the biggest one, or the one that we consider to be the most negative, is that they're getting rid of the rule that allows for a discount for families that have more than one student in college at once, be it twins, be it triplets, or be it two kids that are 2 years apart, but they're going to overlap for 2 years. Right now, as it should be, the formula accounts for that and gives these families a break. That's going away. So effectively, for a lot of colleges, not all of them, but for a lot of colleges, the cost is going to double for families that have more than one kid in school at once. So it's, again, I'm not going to spend too much time. It's ridiculous, but please sign this petition, share the petition better yet, because we've been working really very hard as a team. And we started this petition about 1.5 years ago when the Department of Education first announced it. Immediately, we took action. We've got over 65,000 signatures, but basically the decision makers are saying until you get 100 grand in signatures, until you get 100,000 signatures, we're not going to look at this. You're not going to move the needle. Please sign it, share it, and help us help you ultimately.
I just put it in the chat. Here, I'll do it again. Somebody's asking. But the other thing to remember, we don't want to go down a rabbit hole on this, but the CS profile schools don't have to follow the FAFSA Simplification Act. So this is a whole, people that know me know I'm all about planning opportunities. This is one of the many in this space. So CS schools might end up being more affordable. So I'm just planting that seed. If you've got younger kids, you're going to have multiples. It's huge. They reduce it 30 to 40%. And most of them are telling us off the record, we don't see ourselves changing because they need to compete with their peers that are CS schools. And if they don't change, they're going to end up being more expensive to their anyways. Okay.
No, it's important, right? And it's there a couple of our teammates, right? The director of financial aid at Harvard, right? The director of financial aid at MIT. They're not going to change, right? And those guys, that's Ryan and Josh. I'm talking about specifically, they're an extended part of our team. So we get some great intel in terms of what are they going to do at their institution and schools they're not going to change. They're still going to give a break to families with multiple kids in school at once, but There's not a ton of Harvards and MIT and those types of schools out there, right? That's why it's something that we want to prevent from happening to the extent that we can. For those of you that have already set up your account, this is your home dashboard, right? We're telling you, here's your EFCs right away. We're giving cost projections at any of the colleges that you've put in there. But in terms of the task at hand, there's really two things that we want to help you out with at this stage of the process. Number one, we want to help you understand these financial aid award letters that you've been offered. Like Peg demonstrated, it's confusing. Okay. Once you get a financial aid award letter from a college, we want you to upload it here. So you just type in what school that it's from. Okay. And you're going to upload it. You're going to hit translate. Sometimes this takes a second if I'm sharing my screen on Zoom. So if it does that, if it's misbehaving, I will stop sharing for just a second, but it's pretty quick, right? Generally speaking, it's pretty quick and what we're trying to do here is avoid the confusion, right? We're going to back out the plus loans. We're going to back out the work study. We're just going to help you understand, here's the school's sticker price. This is what you're getting in need-based financial aid, need-based grants. Here's what you're getting in merit-based scholarships. And here's what you're getting in the federal direct student loan and subsidized versus unsubsidized, et cetera. And ultimately, what are you going to be expected to pay out of pocket? And then we want to compare apples to apples. And I think this is an important feature because so many families, and even us that have been doing this forever, we still look at a lot of these awards and have a hard time deciphering what is it actually going to cost me to go to this college. That's the first piece of it, which is great. But more importantly, we want to understand, did you get a good deal? What is your likelihood of going back to the school and getting more money? Now, and I'm going to spend a minute here and getting into the weeds a little bit before we spend time on the mechanics of the process itself. But a few things, in order for us to be able to give you the advantage of this section, you got to do a couple things. 100% of your profile has to be filled. So when you onboard onto the platform, we ask you about a dozen questions. We try to make it a couple of minutes, but you got to answer all of those. And we'll tell you if it's not, this profile is 100% complete, but if it's not, we'll say it's 86% or 50% or 40% or whatever. But all of that has to be complete. And then it also has to be, you have to have the school that you're trying to get evaluated in the search for school section. So you want to make sure that it's up here so we can say, here's what we projected that you should get at this school versus what you actually got. And there's a lot of criteria that's built into the algorithm here, and I'm not going to bore you with everything, but I think it's interesting to point out a couple of factors. So we think this particular family has a very strong case to appeal for more money at BU. And if I want to drill down as to why, I can take a closer look. And there's a couple things, okay? The first thing, and kind of staring us in the face, is the fact that BU, Boston University, their net price calculator, how they hold themselves out to do business for a family like this, with this family's resources, this family's income and asset, and this type of student, they actually awarded $15,000 less than they say they should award this family, right? Now, I'm not picking on BU, and this is just an example, and it is very common for colleges to under award families. Okay, this is not a BU thing. This is just an example thing here. So that's obviously something that we'd want to flag out of the gates. The other thing that we want to look at, or in this particular example of what's relevant, is the institution's methodology. Now, there's a couple different, and this is the technical term, a couple different methodologies that colleges operate within, right? In layman's terms, you might say the way that they do business, okay? Now, schools that use the institutional methodology in general, that kind of tells us there could be more of a gray area, more of an opportunity to squeeze some more juice out of them. Okay. If it's a private school, right? If it is a private school that uses the federal methodology, that would be another example, right? So if I click on the hint here, the term we use internally and also on the platform here is, this is the type of school, or this particular school usually has some wiggle room if you're to push back the right way, right? And you got to do it the right way. But if you do, we can expect to get some more money with pretty decent odds. And then again, in this example, there's family considerations. So that could be multiple kids in school. In this case, this is a 2-household family. This is a divorced family. So we are flagging that as another opportunity to go back to the school and potentially get more money. So when we bake all those variables into this family situation in the same way that we will for your family situation, we're able to give you a decent expectation of how likely is it or not that we can go back to this school and get some more money. And even if it's low, it doesn't mean don't do it, right? But we want to go into that with the expectation, hey, we're probably spinning our wheels here. But it doesn't mean it doesn't happen. Right? And as a matter of fact, I met with a family earlier today that had a relatively successful appeal. And we were telling them it was low odds. So again, it still happens there. And it doesn't mean that the very strong is guaranteed, but you guys get it here. We're setting some pretty clear expectations for you. And it's rare that we're way off. Hopefully that was helpful.
Let me share my screen again here. Yeah, a federal plus loan is the same thing as a parent plus loan. I just refuse to not call it a parent loan just because it is. And I didn't like that they removed that word, but that's the same loan. Yeah, I saw a couple questions about that. Okay, so let me move forward here. So now we've seen, should we always appeal? Matt just showed you, we're kind of following a chronology here, right? Matt just showed you how to translate your award and how likely your appeal is to be successful. Now we're going to talk about where some of that pops up, the likely, strong, all of that comes from. Is it ever a waste of time? Let's look at the good candidates first. And as I'm talking through that, we'll go through the bad. And Matt jumped in even before I introed myself and he was talking about the bad. He just couldn't help himself. He just went right in. So good candidates, typically, if you're a betting person, private schools, you're going to be more successful than public schools. And Matt already mentioned that at the beginning as I was just teasing him. The only time, or I shouldn't say only because that sounds too extreme, but most of the time when we see successful appeals at the state or public level is because there's been a change of circumstance and people have already written in that things have been different. So the trigger in your mind should be when you submit the form. So most of you guys have seniors. If you remember when you were doing the forms, it was all about tax year 2021 for your income. So if your current reality is not as good or 2022 was not as good, that's a trigger in your mind to say, hey, I should think about appealing. And if it was significantly different, even to a state school, you should be appealing for, if you're not showing any need-based eligibility and all of a sudden you are based on your current reality, that's definitely a reason. It totally depends on the school. If you're an in-state kid, how much need, how that school, what their financial policy is, their financial aid policy is. So no guarantees, but that is a time that you would want to appeal to them. Or if you have a one-off situation, and that goes under the state schools, but it's also under our green aqua column here, retirement distributions. If you did anything in the year that they're asking about, like you took a distribution from your 401k, I see all the time people realized a big capital gain and they're like, oh shoot, I wish I hadn't have done that. They just didn't know when their child was a sophomore or junior in high school that they shouldn't have done that. And so now they've got this big one-off deal. Those are times that you want to think about appealing because that raised your income, could have been 6 figures, right? As some families that I look at, and that's done. That's not really part of your income. If you have any impact from COVID that's still affecting you negatively and your picture's worse, that's a reason. If you're divorced, separated, or remarried, there are schools that look at both parents. And you're going to want to think about appealing. There's nuances there. Some of the schools, they have a methodology. Somebody asked what CS was. It's a C profile. So this is a financial aid form that these private schools, a lot of them require along with the FAFSA. And they use that to give out their endowment money. So they have a different methodology called an institutional methodology. And if you understand your way around that, Sometimes you can call them on things and they'll reassess or recalculate their institutional EFC. And that's what the next bullet there, IM and FM, those are the two methodologies, the federal methodology and the institutional. So federal's FAFSA only, institutional are these schools that require this profile. And when you set up, or if you've set up your free MyCap account, you'll see it right up there, your EFC, your federal EFC and your institutional. So you can see those differences there. If you're a business owner, that's another one, because the CSS profile schools, after you apply for financial aid, they ask for all your tax returns and they start digging through a corporate return. If you have an S Corp, or they'll look on your Schedule C if you're a sole proprietor, and they'll look at your expenses, and some of the ones that Uncle Sam, the federal government, is allowing you to have, they might throw out. So these are all triggers and remind, hey, Peg and Matt told me, yeah, this is a candidate for appeal. I should be doing this. And then if you have competing offers around merit, absolutely, that's very valid. And we're going to get in the weeds a little bit about how to appeal for merit versus need-based aid. But that's another trigger. If you've got schools that compete and you've got better merit at one school than another, definitely a good reason to appeal. And remember, they know families are going to appeal, right? They're not going to rescind your child's admission because you appeal. The worst thing that's going to happen is they say, I'm sorry, we can't give you any more money. And you're where you were out of a little time and effort, but you're where you were sitting before you started the process. Okay, you're going to get these slides as I shared at the beginning. So we're not going to go through each one of these bullets. This is just a good thing for you to definitely look through when you get the slides tomorrow. I do want to say that most schools have a deadline to send in your enrollment deposit by May 1. And that's what Matt was referencing earlier. Ideally, you don't pay that before you appeal, because then you have a little bit more leverage, but you do want to have this timeline in your head. You don't want to sit on the awards and wait till April 16th to reach out when you had it all April 1. You want to give the colleges time to look at these appeals so that you can get some data back from them, get some revised awards, hopefully before May 1, so that you can make a more informed decision. Same thing with this, really nice list. Two things I want to hit on. The top one, we're past early decision deadlines at schools, but in case you have younger, I just want to talk about this for a second. You can appeal early decision. It's not like you sign a contract that you're going to go to the school. Doesn't mean you can't appeal. And I personally had successful appeals, and other people on the CAP team have too. Depends on the situation in the school. I've seen them under award for need. I wouldn't say consistently, but they do it. And then if you nicely, in the right way that Matt's going to talk about in a minute, let them know that, they're usually going to up the ante. And that's what I've had with my family. So just saying that you can appeal early decision, it still falls in the bucket of what we're talking about tonight. And then the other thing, because I answered a couple questions in the Q&A, you can appeal merit aid. If you're appealing merit aid and those competing offers are huge, like I just mentioned, you are going to appeal to the Office of Admissions, because that's the part of the university that's awarding the merit aid. If it's need-based aid, you're going to appeal to financial aid, because they're the ones that do the need-based aid. So you could, I've had a few families that do both, right? Just depends. Or it might be need-based at one school. Had a couple like that this year, and then merit at other schools, just depending. And then there's a lot of other good tidbits in here for you guys to review later. All right, I will let you take over here, Matt. And you're muted. There you go.
No, I got you. Let me just finish last question here. Not last question. We got many to go. And guys, we're not going to be able to get to every question tonight. We will give it our very best efforts, but I promise we will leave you with how to continue to interface with us and leverage our expertise moving forward tonight. But again, we probably won't be able to get to everyone. So this slide, again, of all the slides we do and I do, and there's lots of them, this is probably my favorite. Looks very simple, very bare bones, not much to see here. But I'm going to expand on all of these. I think this is the most important part of the presentation. And it's also something we've been honing on for over a decade, right? Like I mentioned earlier, we're really fortunate. Some of our team members are currently the directors of financial aid at some of the top institutions in our country, and we're very lucky to have access to them every day and tap into their network and kind of that side of the fence. Specifically on this, we work with them all year, but this is when we bother them the most. And you guys will have the opportunity to meet with any of these folks if you choose to, and I'll talk about that in just a few minutes here. But we get to tap their brain to say, how can this family get more money based on their situation, based on the college that they're pushing back on? And obviously, there's not a one size fits all game plan. There's really not. Every college is different. There's individuals at that college, right? These human beings are different, and you're different. There's different student, there's different family dynamics, but these are some guidelines that if we're pretty good with these, we can maximize our efforts of having a successful appeal. The first one might sound like the most obvious, but and I've always poo-pooed it, but Ryan Callahan, and again, he's the director of financial aid at Harvard. He's the one that always leans on me to say, do not brush this piece of advice under the rug. Ryan's a serious dude, right? He's been in financial aid his entire career. Before Harvard, it was MIT. Before that, it was BC. His wife's a director of financial aid. Before that, he was in the IRS. That's where he got his start. It's fitting of his personality.
That's why he's so serious, because he was at the IRS.
Serious dude, man. He's a good... And again, Ryan, I present with Ryan all the time, and we're friends, so he can take it. But if any of you choose to meet with him, you'll see this guy means business, right? But he's the one that tells us that, listen, my job in financial aid is to look at these numbers, and that's all I look at. I don't see the essay. I don't do the interview. I look at the numbers. I'm employed by this institution. Yes, we're nonprofit, but we got to make money. I have to make margins on each of these kids or a certain percentage of families that come in here. So I'm trying to put together a package in such a way that we give them enough that they come here, but it's still a win for us as an institution. That's easy for me to do when there's no human element involved. What makes it very hard is when the parent, the student, both pick up the phone, write a letter, whatever, and say, hey, the best day of our lives is when we got accepted into your college. The worst day was 2 weeks later when we got the financial offer. And now as a parent, I can't sleep because I'm thinking about, I might have to go tell my kid that's earned this acceptance into this college, and we can't figure this out as a family in terms of how to pay for it, which is not uncommon, but we want to share that sentiment, and we want it to come from that place. And then we want to ask for a specific amount, right? Make their job easier, spoon feed them, right? Be able to go back and say, Ryan, we did our homework. This is still going to be a huge stretch for us, but if you can come up with another $8,000, we're going to sign on a dotted line. We'll make it happen. So that's important. We want to ask for a specific number. We've got this question a lot. It's especially important for families that are not eligible for need-based aid. This is just a merit-based play. This is when we want to talk about offers from other colleges, right? Because this, in some ways, we can say, I don't care how much money I make. Your institution is going to cost me $70,000. One of your relative competitors is going to cost me $50,000. That's a $20,000 delta that I can't ignore for what I consider to be a similar product. That's an important part. Now, and again, the tone here, guys, now what we're doing, I used to use the word negotiate. Peg won't let me use it anymore. And Peg, are you proud of me? I think that's the first time I said it tonight.
Yes, I am proud. Yeah.
Thank you. I should get a gold star because that's what we're doing, guys, of course. But, and these folks are a finicky bunch. You can't use the word negotiate. You really can't. We are appealing for additional financial aid or scholarship consideration. But it is important to say, hey, listen, here's the other offers that we have in front of us, right? And we're 1A and 1B, and a similar product, again, is a $20,000 difference or whatever it happens to be. I'm not asking you to match it dollar for dollar, but we got to get close here in order to make this decision a little bit easier for our family, right? So again, we've teased that throughout, but it's an important piece. And I see the comment here, it's like buying a car, LOL. It is, but these guys and gals, these financial aid counselors are so sensitive. We're not car salesmen. Don't try to negotiate with us. And again, Yes, it is, but the tone and some of the vernacular does matter. We are appealing. But and when I say tone,
well, and I'm just going to interrupt on that too,
Yeah.
because when you're buying a car, there aren't like 10 people lined up wanting to buy that same car right then. And at these colleges, depending on the school, they could have a bunch of kids. So if you approach this in a way, and I don't know if Matt just said this or not, because we say this all the time, but you're not a family that's super fun to deal with, and they got some money to give out, and another family shows up in a different way, not like they're buying a car, and it's a better family to deal with, that family could get the money. So it's not, I love going in and almost walking, you're going to walk out the door at a car dealership. And if you can really walk out that door, they'll call you back. Maybe it's really not the same. So that's why we harp on this. So it's your mindset that you want to shift here.
I'm glad you said that, because Ryan says it all the time, and so does John, and so does Laura. Like, as they're having these conversations, they're evaluating, do I want to have a relationship with this person and this family for the next 4 years? So like you want them motivated to go to bat for you, not, I don't want to deal with this. And again, I know these colleges that are closing and things like this get a lot of press, but there's not a lot of empty beds at these places, right? So in some ways, we don't have a ton of leverage. The tone 100% matters. This next piece here, I would consider to be like I always call it like the PhD level of appealing. Now, as you guys have experienced, a lot of these, specifically private colleges, not only private colleges, but a lot of private colleges are going to ask for your tax returns. We want your full federal tax returns, all the schedules. If you're a business owner, we want that whole thing, right? Give us your whole S Corp return, blah, blah, blah. Why do they want that? It's not to verify what you put on your financial aid applications, which is, I think, what most people think is common sense. Like, hey, they're just fact checking, right? They actually are just looking at that because they want to see your expenses, your deductions, really, I should say, your deductions. And they want to go in there and make their own determination. And they're going to say, okay, you wrote off depreciation. We're not counting that. You wrote off your software because you use it for your consulting business. We'll count half of that. So on and so forth. They're going to make their own determinations, and they are way stricter than the IRS, way stricter. And you have no way of knowing this. Unbeknownst to you, they did not count these colleges a percentage of your write-offs. And so with that, you have an increased income according to their calculation, therefore an increased EFC, therefore less eligibility for financial aid. Unbeknownst to you, our firm recommendation is part of your appeals. You want to ask directly, did you not consider some of the write-offs that were totally fine according to the IRS, right? Because if that is the case, I want to challenge it, right? And I promise you, when we talk about sophisticated appeals being more successful, because they are, that's about as sophisticated as it gets if you are able to identify that being relevant to your family situation at that particular school. Again, the big state flagship universities, that's fallen on deaf ears, right? But outside of that, it's a worthwhile conversation, okay? Be persistent, right? Be kind. It's important to be persistent because we're showing demonstrated interest, which is an important part of this whole evaluation from the college's perspective. But like we just harped on, be kind. Make sure you're being an ambassador for your family, that they're going to want to work with you for the next 4 years. Student leading the charge. Now, this is where, and again, Peg talked about this. If it's a merit-based scholarship appeal, it should be with the admissions office. The student should be the loudest voice in the room with the parent supporting. If it's a need-based financial appeal, that we're talking about a loss of income, or we had a spike in our 2021 that was an anomaly, we had a 1-year distribution, we had a change since FAFSA, that happens with the financial aid office. The parent should be the loudest voice in the room, and the student is there in a supporting capacity, just really providing color commentary, right? So merit-based appeal, student admissions office, need-based appeal, parent, financial aid office. Okay. And I think that's important from a mechanic standpoint. So if you want to show just a recent example from recently, Peg, I'll talk next steps and how we can help you from here beyond tonight, because we're getting a ton of questions in terms of, can you guys help us with this appeal, and what do we have to do to get you a part of our team.
Yeah. And let me show you that real quick, but I just want to answer, because I always touch on this after you finish, and somebody asked a great question about, hey, should we inflate what we want? Because that's like negotiation 101, right? You're applying for a job. You ask for more than what you want, then you say, all right, why don't we split the difference, right? That's 101. You don't want to do that in this situation, in my opinion, because you want to make your ask of what you want. Because if, like, I've had families that there's a $35,000 merit and a $20,000 merit, and okay, should we ask for 35? And we go in MyCap and see what that college is giving in merit, but it's really what, and Matt said this earlier, what's going to make it affordable for you, and stick to that. Make your ask. Because if you over ask, a college will probably look at that and say, there's no way we can meet that ask, and let's give it to another. Let's give 10,000 to another family. This family is asking for 20. We can't do it. And they're probably not going to send their kid if we don't meet this ask. So the ask is really important here. You don't want to think about it like you would with a car.
And it's hard. That's a nuanced part. That's where it's the art and the science. That's where there's not a like, you should ask for exactly 5 or 7. That's where it does. It's totally case by case, but it's an important thing. Yep.
All right, so let me show you an example here before we get done, and that this is an appeal that one of our experts, Vern, did this year around home equity, because we haven't even touched on that, but there's schools that look at that. The CSS profile schools look at it, some of them as just like a liquid asset that you can tap. So this is the award this student got, a merit award for 12.5, and then also a grant. So there was some need-based eligibility there, almost 22,000. So he helped family, they submitted an appeal, decent amount of need-based aid. They came back and said, there's your merit. We're not touching that, because they were appealing on need to the Office of Financial Aid. But look at that grant. It jumped from 22 up to 47. So they had 34,287 and it jumped. I am in no way saying that this is typical or anything. We're just trying to make the point that these things happen. Honestly, we were all like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. And it's a great data point for us as a team, because we're learning more and more every day about what these colleges are doing. So there is definitely wiggle room, and it's all about how much they want the student and what their yields are looking like, all these things that we don't really know. So that's why it is important to appeal, and to appeal the right way, because it could change your reality financially, like in a major way.
Yeah. And Peggy, I can share if you want, because this will be in a slide deck in terms of next steps. But that one in particular, like that, and I had never thought of this. Somebody put in the chat, like, that's a strange nickname for a college. Never occurred to me.
What nickname?
Oxy.
Oh, that never occurred. That's actually a great, that's not a good nickname. It's probably.
I know, but I'm saying we talk about it like almost.
Yeah,
I know we talk about it almost every day.
I always think of them as Oxy, and I don't think of the drug. Wow. Now I will always think of the drug.
And again, not to make light of it, but somebody put that in there. I'm like, how did that never register?
That's always been their nickname. Yeah.
Right. So anyways, I thought you would have a similar reaction that I did. I'm like, oh my God, how did I never think of that?
Never thought.
But on Occidental and schools of they consider, to simplify a little bit, your home equity fair game. If you're a homeowner, they don't look at the equity you have in your home much different than they do the money in your savings account. But we are finding this year in particular, if we can push back on that the right way, that's not a good look for colleges. The reason why Occidental came up with $30,000 more, they don't want to be outed for that. It is because they know it's not right. They shouldn't be holding the equity you have in your home against you and in treating it as a liquid asset, especially now. In recent years ago, you could borrow against your home at an unbelievably competitive rate. And maybe those schools could justify to say, the federal government is charging 8% for a loan, and Sally Mae is charging 12% for a loan. You can borrow at 3% because you're a homeowner. It's not like that anymore. So we're finding really successful results, specifically at these schools that look at home equity and all that. So it's important to flag that this year. That's why I think that Occidental is a great example. And again, Occidental is one of several hundred colleges that are operating in that way. Okay. Now for next steps, guys, we know we're working with our IC partners and our school partners, right? So it's generally speaking, when we go to talk at a high school, we won't talk about what we do from a private standpoint at all outside of the free resources we offer. We think tonight's a little bit different, and also given our time crunch and where we are in the time of the year, and also just our bandwidth as a team, we feel like we're doing folks a service. I like to think, by offering this tonight. And we always, if you guys have been following along before, we always reward our live audiences. But a few things here in terms of next steps. And now, Peg, we got this link figured out, so we can put this in the chat, which I will.
Okay, let me see if I can go grab
I think
it.
I got it. I think I popped
Got
it.
it.
So we broadly put people in 3 buckets, right? Which is obviously unfair, and we're not perfect here, but I think we have a lot of great free resources, right? So you saw the software, you can get in there for free. You can upload your awards and have them analyzed for free. Office hours every other Monday at 7 Eastern time. We just hold court. We just show up. Obviously, this time of year, we're talking about appeals and we're going over case studies. It's myself, it's Peg, it's Dan, different experts. You've heard us talk about a couple of the financial aid counselors on our team that we'll bring in. We have a Facebook group that our experts monitor, and just this great community of you folks that are all going through this at once. I think we've cultivated a nice little community here, and a YouTube channel with a ton of great resources, right? So I think we have a robust amount of free resources. My recommendation for anybody that wants anything above that tonight is book an hour, right? If you go to, and you can go to the link that we put in the chat here to get started, in your MyCap account, either upgrade to valedictorian, or if you already have a paid account, select talk to an expert, because you'll have an hour with one of us specifically to go over your appeal situation, right? And if you do that tonight, you get, what is that? I guess $60 off, right? And so you'll get access to our software for the year, and you'll get an hour with one of us. If this expires at midnight tonight, 12 Eastern time. I know we got a bunch of folks on here, but at 12 Eastern time, that expires largely due to bandwidth. We're not a huge team, and we have this kind of 3-week window to focus on appeals for the class 2023. Even if you're waiting on your awards, I know you Ivy League folks, we still got a couple of weeks before we get our award letters back. What I would recommend is upgrade tonight before you book a time with one of our experts. And again, that can be with me, Peg, our guys that are at Harvard, MIT, and Denison.
Yeah, we got a really good team.
Yeah.
So don't feel if you can't get in with Matt or me that it's not worth it.
Exactly. It doesn't matter. And the other thing that we say here, and again, this is part of our deal with the school partners that we work with. If you book an hour and you feel like, hey, these guys didn't help me get more money, or I didn't get my money's worth for whatever reason, we'll give you your money back, full refund, no questions asked. And we're accountable not only to you, but to the high schools or the IECs that you work with. So we have a couple watchdogs here. And obviously this is being recorded, so I'm going on record here. Just keep that in mind. But we feel so strongly about it, right? So far this year, we're over $10,000 on appeals, right? $10,000 more than the initial offer. Now, I will say that number is inflated because we've had a few of these huge wins that are, again, I don't want to set the expectation that, hey, pay $239, you're going to get 10,000, but that's what the average is. 3,000 to 5,000, I feel, is a better expectation for what we can sign up for. And again, you've heard me talk more than once about the fact that if it's a state school, especially in-state, I'm less confident that we or anybody can help you do better unless we have one of these big pieces of ammunition. But outside of that, I think it's a very good use of your hour. I think it's a very good use of money. I know we're talking about $85,000 colleges and stuff like this, and it's insane. But if you don't get a return on the investment, just say so, and we'll give you your money back. But again, there's some urgency here just of where we are in the time of year. And you can do it just, again, within your account, you'll either hit upgrade or talk to an expert in order to execute that. And if you haven't set up your account, just go to mycap.collegeaidpro.com. You select the valedictorian expert, you put in our coupon code. I don't know if you put this coupon code in yet, Peggy, but if you didn't, this appeals 20, I'll put in the chat.
Yeah, I'll do it. Here.
Yeah, and you'll
It's
be
an easy one to remember. Appeals with an S 20.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
for tonight.
And-
And guys, we're going to be doing our next set of webinars will be the how to borrow, because I'm getting a lot of questions about loans. We are going to go way in the weeds on that. So I'm trying to answer these as best I can, but just realize the Parent Plus loan, it's not even open yet. So you don't have to worry about that now. Just, I would say, focus on the step we're in, and then that'll be the next piece.
Yeah, 100%. And then, okay. Yeah. And then for you, for and we got a lot of multiples tonight, Peggy.
It's pretty, when I had them, it wasn't as common, but nowadays, yeah, it's pretty common. So
Yeah.
it's a big planning opportunity. Look at those CS schools. And we'll see. You know what? These colleges, I don't know if you've been hearing, but I don't know what they're going to do with this, because I don't know that they necessarily want to follow that part of the legislation. We'll see how this whole thing pans out. But you went in from a planning standpoint, you got to assume they're going to follow it and not expect something to get overturned or whatever. Be conservative would be my advice. And then if it's better, that's lovely, but don't assume that.
So we're getting a couple other repeats here. A lot of questions, a lot of great questions. It's just we can't get to all of them. I'm trying to do my best to pick and choose here. We'll try to do a couple more, guys, before we got to bounce past my bedtime. Man. I'm on the East Coast, Peggy. You know what I'm saying? I'm an early riser here. You know that.
Yeah, you're past your bedtime.
But
I know what you're laughing at.
Poor woman. Anxiety. I'm gonna go vomit. Poor thing. We should have said that in the
Hopefully
beginning.
you'll feel better after that. So we made you feel
There you
better.
go.
That's
Go
our-
purge.
that's our
Go
goal.
purge. Yeah, but listen, what I say every day, it is your kids and it is your money. It's two of the most provocative things we all deal with, right? I think emotionally. So if you're feeling completely even keel right now as a parent, I'm worried about you. Okay. So I promise you are in good company. I know people like to put on a good face in public and talk about where their kids got an ED and the great deal and all this. That's not the majority, I promise. And I know Peg and I have interesting insight into the masses here a little bit. Okay. Yeah. And Kim, yeah, we receive emails for upcoming webinars. Yeah, we're always doing our best to communicate. Again, sign up for the free resources. We do our best to make them as robust as possible and make sure that we're communicating. And this is what Peggy and I do every week, multiple times a week. So we're not going anywhere. If you'll have us, we will show up.
All right. I guess on that note, we're a little bit over here.
Yeah. I think we're good. Pardon thoughts, guys, right? Listen, try to remember, especially class 2023, we've won here, right? Your kids are into school. We're going somewhere, right? And even if we're freaked out by the deal, our kids are going to college. I'm obviously biased, but it's something that I believe in. Book an hour, put us to the test. Let us help you get a few more bucks. And the other thing is, oftentimes these hours end up turning to the first half hour, 45. We show you how to get more money from that school. And then we talk about, all right, what do we need to know about loans or whatever other questions?
That's what I love being a financial planner by background, is getting into that 4-year cash flow and how are you going to pay it? And that will really help you sleep at night. Let me tell you.
You're a nerd, Peggy.
I know I'm a nerd. What can I tell you?
4-year cash flow.
All right, well, everybody have a wonderful evening, and we look forward to seeing you next time.
Until next time, good night, Peggy. We'll see you tomorrow.
All right. Bye-bye.